there and welcome. I'm Elaine Starling and you're here with Why 5% Succeed. You know, speaking with confidence in front of a group, or if you need to speak up during an important meeting, never been more important than right now. Knowing how to speak with confidence, clarity, and credibility immediately differentiates you as a leader. It allows you to build trust instantly. And of course, it creates great business opportunities. Well, I am thrilled to have Diane DiResta with me today. She's the founder and CEO of DiResta Communications. She is in New York City as a consultant, but she travels the world advising business leaders who want to communicate with much more impact, whether it's one-on-one or in front of a crowd, or like right now, during an electronic platform. Diane has generously offered to join us to share some of her best tips, tools, techniques, and tactics for showing up powerfully in the moment. And I also, well, let me introduce Diane. Diane, I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm thrilled to be here.
And this handsome guy who's muted himself out, this is my husband and also the show producer, and he's going to be making sure we see any questions or comments that you have. So, Diane, I want to get started right away because so many people are dealing with this on a daily basis. They're in business meetings or they have to get up on stage for some reason. And it's so important that you find a way to work through the fear. So what is one of the things that people can do right now to help get rid of their fear? Could you just talk a little bit about the importance and what your experience has been in today's marketplace?
Sure, and that's why I wrote my newest ebook, Give Fear the Finger, How to Knock Out Fear of Public Speaking, because you really have to deal with this. And what I find when I work with people, and this is over 20 years in my living laboratory, fear is twofold. It's skill set and it's mindset. So the first thing we need to do is work on your mindset. What are you believing about yourself? What are your beliefs about speaking? And then give you the tools, which are the skills. So I show people how to, what confidence looks like, what it sounds like, and how to speak the language of confidence. So if you wanted one tip right away, it would be focus on your breath. Here's the mistake people make. People who are nervous speakers are often thinking of the future. They're imagining all the bad things that can happen. People who are confident speakers live in the present. They know their message and they're focused on the audience, and that's where your focus needs to be. So what I tell people is get over yourself. It's not about you, it's about them. And it's amazing when people hear me say that, there's a shift that happens. And I've often asked people, what was helpful? Well, when you said get over yourself, it's not about you, it's about them, it changed the way I think. So a lot of fear is self-imposed.
That is so true. That is so true. And it's interesting that you bring this up, Diane, because it's one of the things that I teach, is that everybody deals with fear. Fear is there to galvanize you, to empower you, to inspire you to move. It's that adrenaline rush.
Yes, exactly.
And so everybody deals with fear, and what your clients want most is help in managing their own fear, and then being able to focus. And that's really what you can do when you're powerful and confident in front of a room. People feel you. Yes. And when you show up confident, they are more confident. They take on the same emotions that you embody. Have you experienced that too?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is there's always an energy exchange between a speaker and an audience. And people will pick up on your energy. So go in there not making the audience your enemy. And that's what a lot of people do. They see the audience as adversarial. But keep in mind that your audience wants you to succeed. They are there because you have something that they want, whether it's entertainment and feeling good or information. And so a lot of times we tend to minimize ourselves, and especially when people are talking to a senior management audience, they get nervous. Well, they don't feel they have the right to be there. And I always say to them, they need what you have. You have an update, they don't have that. And so you have a right to be there. So the first thing is own that space. You have a right to be there. You have something to offer. So that is the first thing. That's the mindset and the intention you need when you go out there.
You know, Diane, I love what you're talking about here, especially that your audience is on your side. And I just want to share a personal experience that I had that really exemplifies that, because I got a chance to attend a Cirque du Soleil presentation. And if you've ever been to Cirque du Soleil, they're amazing. Beautiful acrobats, all kinds of stuff. Well, somebody was up on the high wire, and they were doing this very difficult maneuver, and he missed. And he hit the net.
Thank
and the
God.
whole audience was just like, ooh, we were there. It's like, you're the one on the trapeze. You're the one on that wire, right? You're the guy balancing, teetering, and you're just like, ah. And so when he finished the routine, he got back up, same position, did it again, and nailed it. And we cheered. I mean, people stood up. It was because he was willing to stand up and own it and get on with it that was so incredibly powerful for the entire audience.
That's part of the hero's journey, the fall into the abyss and then getting yourself up and rising. And think about a singer when they hit a bad note. You cringe for them. You don't want that to happen. And so what we're talking about is twofold. One is the audience is on your side, so know that. And then when you do make a mistake, it's all in the recovery. And one of the things I teach my clients is recovery strategies. Just think of that ice skater when they're in the Olympics and they fall. What do, Elaine? They get right back up. They know they're not winning, but they don't show it. So that's what people need to do. So one is setting your mind for positive thinking, success, and confidence, but the confidence really comes with the skill and knowing that you can manage through those difficult times. So here's a tip. I often say to audiences, all right, tell me what's your biggest fear? Oh, well, what if I trip when I go up? And I said, all right, let's imagine you tripped. What could you do? And they're dumbfounded. And I said, well, how about saying, I want you to know I've been practicing that entrance for weeks. Or, never let it be said, I don't know how to make an entrance. When you do that, people laugh. Why? Because it's relief. They're feeling that tension along with you. And when you don't take it seriously, they laugh. And it humanizes you. So don't be afraid to make a mistake. It's all right. And I tell people when I work with them in workshops, I don't allow perfection in these rooms. And I don't allow perfection for two reasons. One, you can't achieve it on Earth, so why try? But secondly, even if you could, people would hate you because nobody likes a perfect person. Isn't that right?
It's so true.
Yeah. So aim not to be perfect because that's what holds you back and inhibits you. Aim to be human, and that's when you have your power. People connect with that.
People should tweet that. Don't aim to be perfect. Aim to be human. I love it.
All right. Did you hear that, Dane? Go tweet that now, @SpeakingPro.
Well, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions because when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned that fear shows up in 3 different ways. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about the 3 different ways people tend to experience fear?
Well, actually, there are 4. It shows up physically in the body. It shows up mentally in your mind and your thinking. It shows up behaviorally in terms of what you actually do. And it also shows up chemically, although we can't see that. There are chemical changes in the body. So physically, what might happen is you start sweating or you start fidgeting with your hands. So those are the physical manifestations of nervousness. Mentally, what happens is you start thinking negative thoughts, and that can cause you to freeze. And behaviorally, you may hold back and be very stiff and not be forthcoming. And the chemical is you'll probably have an increase of cortisol to the brain, which is the stress hormone, which again is going to impact your performance. So there are things that you can do. There are things you can do.
I was going to say, what are some things we can do to try to overcome that and try to prevent those different methods of fear showing up?
All right, so you don't have to spend a lifetime. Here are some quick tips you can use immediately. One is power poses. There's been research at Harvard, a researcher by the name of Amy Cuddy. She's a neuroscientist who also did a TED Talk. They found that when you get into these power poses for 2 minutes, you actually get an increase or a surge in testosterone, which is the courage or risk-taking hormone. So here is the first pose, and I don't know if you can see me, but it's the Wonder Woman pose. And it's the hands on the hips, or it's the Superman pose. So your hands are on your hips. All right, so that's the first thing. So I would say go into the restroom right before your presentation and hold that pose for 2 minutes and think positive thoughts. And you're going to find that there's a mind-body connection. So as you put your body into a certain state, it sends up hormones and thoughts, and you start to feel a little bit more confident. Now, another pose that you can do is a power pose in the seated position. And what you do is, you can see there, you lean forward at a 15-degree angle with your feet flat on the floor and your hands on the table. So not only is this a listening position, but it actually increases your confidence. How do I know? Because I've tested it. I've taught this to clients, and they will come back after meeting and they'll say, you know, I got into that position and I did feel more confident. Why? Because what happens is when you're nervous, your energy's going out in all directions and you lack focus. So by having people focus their energy in the posturing, it calms them down. They get positive feedback because people are reacting in a positive way, and then there's this continual feedback loop. And so it's a great way to start out your presentation.
I love that. I absolutely love it.
So those are things you can do physically.
Yeah, it's so simple. We don't think about the message that you communicate with your body, but those subtle cues of leaning in, right, and smiling, just making the eye contact, all those things present you as someone who's really interested and engaged and more powerful.
Yes.
I love that. That's so important. So what's one thing that we should just never do? What's a big, bad, ugly no-no?
An ugly no. The lack of preparation. I would say the number one mistake is lack of focus and lack of preparation. Do not wing it. You know, unless you're Bill Clinton, most of us don't have that ability to speak off the cuff and be really entertaining, charming, and stay on message. So for most of us, we have to prepare, and it's 90% preparation and only 10% delivery. People have no idea when they see a seamless presentation what it took to get there. I was working with a partner in a law firm, and she was giving a 5-minute introduction or opening presentation. We spent 3 one-hour sessions on that, and she nailed it. But people thought it was something that was spontaneous. No, we spent a lot of time because it was important. Why was she willing to invest that kind of time and money? Because it's her image, it's her brand. She was in a leadership position, president of this association, and it really makes a difference. So
it sure does. It sure does. How you show up in today's environment, it's truly a competitive advantage, right? It's a big differentiator. And we were talking earlier that this is one of the ways people can make a lot of money, right? That just being able to speak effectively on your topic is really important. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely, and in fact, one of the things I say in almost every speech that I give is that speaking is the new competitive advantage. And that's because our world has become so commoditized that what separates you from your competition is your presentation, how you show up. And it's also a way to build trust. So I liken speaking, or I would say marketing with a speech, as test driving a car, because what happens is they see you in action, it establishes your brand, it establishes you as an expert, and then there's a trust, and when they need that expert, guess who they're going to remember? You, because you spoke to them. And I believe that even though they say the pen is mightier than the sword and writing is the number one credibility piece, the second to writing or being an author is a speaker.
Mm-hmm. So true. And with video becoming so much more universal, it's ubiquitous online these days. I mean, it is the hot thing. If you don't have video around your business, you're really missing out. Video is so powerful because it allows people to really connect with you. Yes. They see all of your movements, your body movements, they hear your voice, and of course they're getting the message at the same time. So being an effective speaker live or in recordings is really, really key. And Diane, I know you're an expert across the board. Are there any little differences that we should know about? I mean, you and I are on video right now. Right. We're doing this as a Google Hangout. Are there certain techniques that you found are more effective when you're doing something virtually versus live?
Yes, and one of the things we tested out earlier is where you look. A lot of times I'm looking up at the webcam lens, and as you can see, my eyes are up higher now. But often, if I look directly at the screen, it looks like I'm looking down. So if you've ever had that experience with a webcam, you're talking to someone, they're talking to you, but your eyes are here. So you need to test that out, especially in a job interview, since many more are virtual. So that's one of the things that you want to test out. And also realize that there can be a delay time. And lighting is important. We both adjusted our lights so we wouldn't have that harsh lighting, the fluorescent lighting. And interestingly, I was just interviewed by Investor Business Daily on video presentations because it's so powerful.
That's really cool. That is really cool. So, whoops. Little technical difficulties. And that's the beauty of live video.
What's happening right now in the moment is what you want to do when you are confident and comfortable. You just embrace the technical glitch or whatever's happening in the moment. And that's why I'll tell people when you're presenting, let's say you have PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever you have a backup. Have some hard copies and be able to speak even without the hard copies because something will happen. So how do you incorporate that? And humor is a good way to do that. Make light of it. Embrace it, include it. So I'm glad the heavy breathing stopped.
True. You know, this really reminds me of the early days of television. And if you've ever seen some of the funniest outtakes when TV was live and they didn't do the pre-recorded stuff, it was the goof-ups. It was like when the set fell over or the doorbell got stuck and they couldn't turn it off. It was those silly things that just cracked everybody up, and the audience was cracking up with them.
And that's why they have shows called bloopers. In fact, you know what I just did, Elaine? When I was doing, I have about 109 YouTube videos on my channel, and what I did a few takes, and things would happen. I'd say, do it again. So you know what? I decided that I was going to include some bloopers. Because so my assistant's going to put those up. I think there were 3 of them, just so people see that even if it looks seamless, it's not. And people think if you're a professional speaker that you don't make mistakes, and we all do, and we all have our moments.
Absolutely. Well, you know, you are a pro.
Thank you.
Work with the best of the best who want to be even better. They want to show up at their most effective. Because they're really, really dedicated to making a difference for their audiences.
Yes.
That's what it's all about. So could you share with us one of those top tips? What is a secret that the pros really know and use to their advantage?
Well, aside from tailoring and preparing for your audience, I would say the pros do 2 things that separate the good from the great. One is they're master storytellers, and the second is they are masters of the pause. And this is the hardest thing for everybody, more than storytelling, because people are afraid of silence. And so when I work with people, I get them to spend time being silent. And it's unnerving, but it's amazing that dramatic pause at the end. You see how you're nodding and I'm drawing you in.
Yeah.
So using strategic pausing can be very powerful, and people don't do it well enough. They don't do it often enough. So that's one thing that people can start working on now to improve their presentations.
So I do have another question for you, and it's around pacing. Because when you're passionate about your subject and you're really in the zone, you probably pick up your pacing and you're talking a little fast, and people may have trouble understanding you because you're so excited about it, and blah, 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 blah. But there may be times when you're much more effective if you can slow down, and it's not just a pause, it's just the pace of the communication. Could you comment on that?
Sure. Everybody has different energy levels, so you can't take a high energy person and slow them down. It's not natural. It's like a long record. So what you want to do instead, I was just going to say 33 1/3, but I realize most people don't remember those record speeds, which is another thing.
Right?
That's another thing you need to be aware of when you are speaking. What are the examples you're using, and who's your audience? Because today a lot of millennials don't relate to certain technology that was true when I was growing up. So that said, it's not about slowing the rate. It's about putting in the pauses. And I call it the beat technique. If you can count 2 to 3 pauses at the end of a sentence where you would have a period, that will do it for you. So I can be really high energy. But if I come to a stop where there would be a period or a comma, then the message gets through. So here's the thing. The brain cannot process when you're speaking on one run-on sentence. I don't think people speak too fast. What they do is this. They speak on one long run-on sentence that doesn't stop. You don't know where the periods or the commas are going, and then they run out of breath. When someone runs out of breath, I know what their problem is. It's a quick diagnosis. Your sentences are too long, and you're not coming to a stop. So you can practice the beat technique, and I'll take you through this. I would have people repeat after me, today is Wednesday, tomorrow will be Thursday, and then it will be Friday. If you can tolerate that silence, it gives enough processing time to the brain so that the message lands. When you speak a mile a minute, or when you're speaking on one run-on sentence, it's actually like a ticker tape. It goes right past people and it doesn't land. So do you want your message to get through, and do you want to have emotional impact? Master the pause.
Brilliant, brilliant words of advice. I really love that. Master the pause.
Mm-hmm.
So
not an easy thing, easier said than done, but very powerful. And you know what I discovered, Elaine? It's not rocket science, but it's the little things that make the greatest impact. So people don't have to necessarily do a whole total makeover. Just do these little tweaks. Start with one thing, work on the pause, then work on your body posture, and eventually it all comes together. But the key in effective presentation is alignment, that visual, vocal, and verbal are all saying the same thing. And that's when you have the trust. That's when you have the credibility, when it's all working together.
And that can take a little practice. That's not necessarily an overnight, having the visual, verbal, and vocal. I didn't say that right. What were they again?
Visual, vocal, and verbal.
Okay, visual, vocal, and verbal. Having visual, vocal, and verbal all in alignment is something that requires practice. It requires repetition and preparation. So you may not feel that it's a natural thing, but working with a pro who can see what you're doing from an objective perspective, some quick coaching techniques to shift what you're doing, like that power pose thing, that Wonder Woman thing, it works.
I know it works.
It really works. Yeah. Who knew? Like you say, it's not rocket science. They're little things.
This is the beauty of neuroscience, because now they're looking at the brain and they're discovering these things, and it's very empowering and very enlightening. So I'm excited to find out what else is going to happen.
You know, one of the things that I absolutely love, and I'm sure you're familiar with this too, Diane, it's the research about priming and how you can actually prime your brain. So you were talking about when you're getting ready to give a presentation or go into a meeting that's really important, that you need to think thoughts that support you. Could you talk a little bit about priming and what kinds of things we can say to ourselves to get ready for that presentation?
It's important to have rituals that prepare you. Just like an athlete, they don't start running, or I'll say to someone, do you play tennis? Well, you don't just go up to the net and whack. You get into the position, you get in the readiness position, but you also set your mind before you go out on the court. And it's the same thing with speaking. In a sense, there's a sport of speaking. And so one of the things I created for the listeners and viewers is a video of affirmations that are set to music. So if you go to my YouTube channel, which is simply /Diane DiResta, you will see on one of the channels affirmations, and you can play it daily. And it comes up with, I am confident, I am a good speaker, and all those empowering messages. The brain, the subconscious mind, takes you literally. And if you continually say negative things, that's what you'll experience. So you can prime your mind by saying positive things, by doing your power poses, and by doing your breath work. Breathing is the key. If there was not one thing only, I would say work on your breathing. Because when you use deep abdominal breathing, it's a type of meditation. and it sets you in a zone so that when you have that racing heart, it will actually slow down the physiology.
Love it. You provided some really, really valuable insights. I know we talked about the power poses for the physical, but it also changes your chemistry, your brain chemistry,
it does,
which is really powerful. And then we talked about priming so that you get your mental state in a good, positive place. And then the other thing that we talked about was you said that there's fear mentally, physically, and in your behavior. Are there certain behaviors that we can do that will help us present a more confident impression in front of an audience?
You know what the most typical behavior is? Avoidance. Avoidance, not speaking at all. And I tell people that you cannot avoid speaking any longer, and to do so is career suicide. Because if you're an entrepreneur and you're not speaking to promote your business, you're actually leaving money on the table. And if you work for a company and you're not speaking, that's career suicide because you're losing visibility. And if you're a woman, speaking levels the playing field, so why would you avoid it? So the avoidance is key. So one of the behaviors that will empower you is get there early and shake hands with people and meet and greet. Why? Because now you know names, you know something about them, and you feel like you have some allies, and you can actually reference anything that people said to you and draw them in. So you could say, well, I'm glad to be here. When I was talking to Elaine before we started, she said this, and lead right in. So that's one of the things that will be very helpful. Don't make the audience your enemy, make them your friends, because they are.
That is so true. And what is a good behavior when you're in a professional business meeting and maybe everybody's going to be sitting around a conference table? Do you still encourage people? It might be folks that you work with, so you already know them. You may not need to introduce yourself. Is there a technique, a behavior that we can do that will help us feel confident and help us look confident in the moment?
Certainly the power position, getting into a readiness position at the table when you're seated, but also having some small talk and using humor. Nothing relaxes the mind and the body better than humor. So being natural. The mistake or the myth I find is that people think that to be authoritative you need to be serious. And so they're there very seriously. And it has the opposite effect. If you think about captains of industry at the top of their field who are good speakers, they laugh, they joke, they're lighthearted, they are spontaneous. So don't be afraid to go off message. As long as you've prepared and you have your notes, you can come back. But a confident speaker will react to what's happening in the moment at the meeting and then bring it back.
Excellent. I love that. React to what's happening in the moment. Really stay present in the moment. Because when you get afraid, I love the way you said, you're focused on the future and you're pretending that it's going to be a disaster.
Yes.
Instead, you're focused on what's happening right now and you're there truly to serve the audience and make sure they have an incredibly rewarding experience, you can show up much more effectively. Because it's not about you, it's about them. Love what you said there. Really powerful. So, Diane, you've come across a lot of hidden challenges. Because you worked with lots and lots of folks of all different levels.
Yes.
Could you share some of the most common hidden challenges or mistakes that people make?
I don't know if they're hidden, but certain mistakes. And let me tell you, you're absolutely right. As a speech pathologist, which was my first career, I've worked with ages 4 to 84. And in my business, DiResta Communications, I've worked across industries with entry-level associates as well as CEOs of corporations. So I have a wide breadth, and I would say that some of the typical mistakes, number one, is lack of focus. People's messages are going out in all directions. So the first thing we do is we figure out, how do you get laser-like focus? Here's a tip that you can use right away, and it's the fill in the blank. At the end of my presentation, the audience will blank. The answer to that is your outcome. And when you are crystal clear about your outcome, then everything you do and prepare is leading you to that end result or your intention. I often warn people, though, just don't be like somebody in one of my workshops who once said, at the end of my presentation, the audience will applaud. Well, that's very nice, but that is not an outcome. So what do you want to have happen at the end? that is your outcome. So that's one of the most common mistakes. Another one is lack of eye contact, not knowing where to look at an audience. And so people look over their heads, they look down, their eyes dart. The hardest part is when people get started. So for your opening, find one friendly face and talk only to that person and deliver that opening line. Memorize your opening line, because once you get started, you're good. But it's that first moment that's really challenging for most people.
I love it. I love it. And I may not have said it before, but Diane, I loved when we were speaking earlier, and you said that your commitment was really to help people get rid of their fear about speaking powerfully, effectively, and concisely. Mm-hmm. And you actually have some great resources that people can use to refine their presentations and be able to show up much more effectively. Could you describe that for us briefly?
Sure. I have a number of resources. One is my first book that I wrote called Knockout Presentations, and that is everything from soup to nuts, and I wrote it like a seminar so that it's the next best thing to having me. It actually has the tips, the checklist, the do's and don'ts, the skills. The new book, which is an ebook, is Give Fear the Finger, and that's focused strictly on the confidence building and the fear busting techniques. I have a site called speechmakersite.com, and SpeechMaker is call it an app, but it's online, and it allows you to create either an informational or persuasive talk. So what I did is I put the templates there, and it gives you transitions if you want to use those, or you could use your own, and all you do is type in. Once you're finished, you hit send, and it creates a PDF for you. So it takes you through the process. Yeah, it's a really cool instrument or app, and that's speechmakersite.com. And I also have a 3-part webinar series called Knockout Presentations. The first one is on delivery skills. That's an hour. The second hour is on organization, and the third one is on questions and answers. And of course, there's my YouTube channel.
Take a drink of water.
Always have water when you're speaking.
I have my water too. I've got my little
I'm not really choking. I'm just doing that for demonstration purposes.
Great recovery. I love it. I love it. You live what you teach.
Thank you.
And I love how you make it so accessible and so easy for us to implement, because that's the biggest thing. I think one of the biggest fears people have is just getting started. Where do I even start, right?
Yeah.
It can be very intimidating and overwhelming.
Start with the decision. Start with the decision that you're going to be a better speaker this year, and it doesn't matter that January is gone. You can start right today, and you can do something very simple. Start by going to my website, DiResta.com. There are a lot of resources there. Go to my YouTube channel, /Diane DiResta. There are so many instructional videos. There's one on fear. There's one on organization. There's one on listening. Go visit those areas, or get yourself a coach. Take a class. Watch TED Talks and model from those speakers. Model from speakers that you see live. Join Toastmasters. There's a solution for everyone at every level, including $0. So there's no excuse anymore. Anybody can be an effective speaker. Do you know what my mantra is, right? Gifted speakers are born. Effective speakers are made. It's about skills, and I can teach anybody the skills. Not everyone's going to be a Martin Luther King, but anybody can be effective in getting their message from their brain to the brain of someone else.
That is fabulous. Well, Diane, I don't know how you could possibly improve on what you've already given us, but is there any final words or any final idea that you'd like to leave us with?
That this skill of public speaking is not going away, and that it's all public speaking. So when people say, I'm not a public speaker, yes, you are. Do you leave voicemails? Do you give meeting updates? Do you network? That's all public speaking, and it's all about your brand, your persona, your image. And as important as the way that you dress is your verbal dress, the way that you present yourself. How are you coming across visually, vocally, and verbally? Anybody can be an effective speaker. Start today. Go to these websites. Contact somebody that you trust, and get started.
Wonderful. Diane, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know we've all learned a lot. I'm going to be using that power pose. I'm going to be leaning in with everybody. And I hope that you'll adopt those things too. Make sure you prime before you start any conversation. Tell yourself that it's going to be a great conversation. You're going to make a huge difference in someone else's life today. It's amazing how that removes the pressure off of you when you're focused on them. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing everybody again next week, same time. Take care.